Hi, this is Nathan Young with the Home Service Leaders Podcast. I'm here today with Steve. Correct me on your pronunciation. Sheinkopf?
Good.
Oh, thank you.
First, right out of the gate.
Yeah. I'm 1 for 1 so far. And so he's the owner of Yale Appliance. Steve, tell us a little bit about Yale. How did you get here? Your grandfather founded the company. What? Tell me more about you.
Well, it didn't really take any talent for me. I was kind of born into it. As far as how it gets started, it's every family get-together is like a different story. The latest iteration is, my grandfather came over from Poland, brought all his other brothers in, worked to bring all his brothers in. Started working at Yale somewhere around 1923, but he definitely bought into it around 1932. I'm okay with that story because, 1932 wasn't exactly the banner year for the American economy. So he took all his money he had, $3,500 to buy into the company. And it's been in the family ever since. My dad took over my grandfather. And, when I was 7, I got woken up and I started cleaning light fixtures and sweeping floors and, putting stuff away like pretty much everybody else back then. So that's the brief family history.
Sounds like we could probably have a whole thing just on that. I have some suspicion that you left out a few moments in there.
You only told me we had 40 minutes.
Right. Well, and what does the business look like now? You have several locations. You're a lot bigger.
Yeah, it's changed a lot, obviously. We started it. We started actually on Portland Street, which is in Boston. If you don't know Portland Street, it's fine because it really isn't there anymore. It was taken by the state in eminent domain. It's now like the State House. So we moved to Canal Street, which is right across from the Boston Garden. And then my dad, we were a tenant in Will for like 25 years. The landlord sold it, so we had to be out. My father found it here and measured on the coldest day of 1983. So Dorchester, we're in the Dorchester section of Boston, which back then was really scary. Now it's kind of gentrified. So in 2015, we built our second store in Framingham, which is kind of near where I grew up. I grew up in Needham. And then last year, in the middle of the pandemic, we opened up on the South Shore in Hanover, actually not in the middle, January 4th. So we had a good 6 weeks before the pandemic, or 8 weeks. Not exactly the best time. We operate out of Stoughton, Mass, too, with the warehousing and trucking. So,
okay, and so over the last. So, what would you say? 1 or 2 things. Now, obviously, a lot. You just mentioned that there would be a lot, but what would you say are maybe the top 3 things that have changed since your grandfather founded the company originally, right? Like since it started. What are the top 3 things that have really changed? Well,
my grandfather may have worked with 7 to 10 people. We have about 190 now. So a lot of it is communication and clarity of communication, and enforcing standards. I don't mean enforcing like a sheriff. I mean, managing the standards. I think growing, and I'm certain you'll probably talk about growth. I think growth is good if it's good organic growth, if you're satisfying your customers. And again, the whole customer, we started in service in the 90s. And that's certainly a big part of our business too. That was never part of my grandfather's, vision, if you will. So really from it's as much people management in terms of customers, internal customers, which are, in my opinion, as important as your final customers. If you don't treat them right, they're not going to treat the customer right. Certainly your vendors would be a part of that. And just that whole management HR piece that's hard. Scaling up is really hard. Getting from that kind of entrepreneurial to more of a corporate without losing the personality that made it engaging initially. That's really the hard part of it, I think.
Interesting. What I have a suspicion, but what would you say has stayed the same the whole time, aside from the product, maybe?
Well, I think we kept the whole family part. We wanted to be nimble, because you have to be nimble. If anything, last year teaches anybody, you have to be able to readdress the way you do things. You can't do that with really a less than skilled workforce. So, man, there's so many things. But what was I'm sorry. I mean, it's going to sound dumb. What was the original question as I go off on a tangent?
No, you have so much history that you could talk about. Like, it's hard to not get yourself lost in that a little bit. I said, what's something that has definitely stayed the same? And it sounds like what you're saying. The number one thing is family first, not losing that feeling, but also the quality of the employee serving the customer.
Exactly. You got to be more corporate, but you can't lose a personality.
Yes.
And that's a tough balance. And, we don't act like, and I have nothing against chain stores. Home Depot, Lowe's, Best Buy, we have to be different than them. We have to be more compelling than them to win a customer. Seriously. We're selling commodities. So we have to be the intangible that people buy.
I recently have been talking a lot with business owners in the upper north. I mentioned this. I just moved to Minnesota. And I don't know if you're familiar at all, but there's lots of cabins up here. Lots of cabins. Several of the guys that I've been talking to, one of them is the owner of a sawmill, and other guys sort of in a very similar space, construction for these sort of hideaway homes and places where people want to live up here. And they've been saying very similarly, like, look, you can go get a kit, you can go get your materials from the big box store. And there's nothing wrong with that. And we understand on some level, we are selling the same thing. We're selling wood planks. And so we have to differentiate. We have to have the experienced advice, that knowledge that is born of not having just a commodity perspective on the product, but of this being what we do. And it sounds like you're saying something very similar.
Yeah, that's definitely is. You can't play somebody else's game. But you're talking about a box store, an internet company, or any of the other 60 competitors we have in the 20-mile area of Boston that we compete with. You have to be special. There's some dimension that you have to win, and you have to be competitive in the other dimensions too. You can't be high in advice and tremendously high in price.
Right.
It doesn't work.
Well, also, one of the things I've been talking about, again, my company specializes in doing marketing for home service, and we've seen home services, frankly, get a gigantic boost over the last year. It's been really interesting to watch what went up and what went down, but as people left the office and they sat in their house and worked from their homes, they suddenly realized that maybe it's time to expand that patio. Maybe I hate my appliances and would like to upgrade. Maybe my lighting does suck. And and we've seen sort of this big market shift over to the home. And I personally have also done this. So I've been a consumer in the same way. How has this, for some of our guys, it's been a boon. You have retail stores, so I can't imagine it's not a little different for you. Has this been good? Has it been bad? You just mentioned you opened up a different store right at the beginning. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, it's really the story of 2 years. It's the story of the first year, the first half of the year, or maybe since February to say June, where it was no demand and okay supply. And then the back half of the year, it's exploding demand and no supply. Suppliers have had problems. You can't blame them. I mean, COVID through the factory now, you've got to socially distance in the factory that you didn't have to socially distance. You got to rethink that. Their parts supplier went down with COVID. Now you don't have hinges. And hinges can be very important when you want to open a fridge. One of the reps told me, if you have 80 of the 84 parts that make a dishwasher, it doesn't mean you ship the dishwasher. So it's been challenging. I think for the first half, I was in. I think all of us were scared. This is not an event we've ever seen. What we were able to do is because we've developed a pretty good IT department. We got everybody laptops. We increased the hours that we work from 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. and on the phone and virtually in chat. And then we had the stores by appointment only. So we're able to limit and really curate the people that came in. Because we went from 3,000 visits roughly in February to 273 in April. So what we did is we converted all that business from walk-in brick and mortar to virtual chat, showroom appointment, and click to chat. So we went from 1,474 chats in January to 3,875 in April.
I'm counting mentally. I'm doing some quick math, right? Based on how many visits that you said you had to how many visits you said you had the next month, and then how many chats in 1 month to the next one. And I'm going, those sound pretty close to each other. The difference there.
It's really, the number is like 4,430 in February. February's got President's Day. So you have a promotion in February. So February is actually a good month for appliances, especially if it doesn't snow like Minneapolis or say Boston. In April, you don't have anything. So it went from like 4,450 down to almost 4,200 in a non-promotional period. So I that's a win.
Yeah.
And it caused you to rethink. I mean, are the expenses that you normally have, do they serve you? The things that you can do. We used to have we have a warehouse clearance twice a year. We made it virtual. So people shopped online for the things that we had virtually, and we sold $500,000 worth of stuff that was lying around. So really what you need to do is just optimize everything you can. And everything you do, sell to plan, and optimize every customer interaction, whether it's online, whether it's in store, and you take nothing for granted. So we were lucky. Either that, we were lucky. Part of it's luck, part of it is, foresight of trying to get ahead.
Well, you said something that I think will be true permanently. I'll be like, hey, clip that. That's the clip. That's the sentence. Is you said optimize every part of the customer interaction. You said, is this expense serving you? Is it, and to tie those two things together then, is this expense serving the customer? Is the question that the two things you just said begs to me, is this expense really serving the customer? And I don't think that that's something in a post-COVID world, that's not a question that goes away. That's a solid strategic question no matter what. It always has been probably, but definitively now.
Well, what it goes down to is, even if it's a legitimate expense, if we've always been trying to think 5 to 10 years ahead, and that's good, until something like this comes around. When March 13th happens, kids aren't going to school, everybody's scared. 5 to 10 years is now, right? So what you need to do is make sure that the expenses are absolutely essential. And you can even put on hold the ones that you need sometime in the future. But you really have to, it's almost like, there's this horrible thing I studied in the 80s called variable cost accounting, which is really just paying for the stuff you need right now. And, the airline industry, when they go through wars, their price wars back then used to do that. And it's a really bad thing in the long term, because somehow you got to pay for the investments you need to make in planes. If you are just paying for gas, employee, staff, and, electricity, water, and all that other stuff, you won't be able to buy that plane in 10 years. So, but for now, something like this and an event with that much hysteria behind it, that's kind of the way you have to think, only in the short term.
Well, what you just said sounds like a piece of advice that was concise but hard won. I'm just thinking through my head of Did somebody just tell him that? No, he's made him a few mistakes along the way to get him to being willing to say that out loud, right?
Well, let's put it this way. I'm not sure if I made a mistake today, but I'm pretty sure that I've made more than my share of mistakes. And unfortunately, big mistakes are how you learn, because those are the ones that really hurt are the ones you don't typically forget.
Oh man. Well, so that's gonna hurt for the rest of the. I'm gonna be thinking about that one for a while. I'll tell my wife that the next time our kids do something like crazy. Well, Steve said, you said this. You said exploding growth, no demand. I'm sorry, no demand. You exploding growth, tightening supply. You are finding yourself then with this greater demand for products and services. Do you actually are you able then to get the cash flow because of that, or is the actual availability down enough that you are still finding a constraint, or have you guys been able to find some growth in this?
Well, we found some growth in it, and it's a different thing. First of all, when you talk about, we're lucky in home services and what you do and the people you represent, because right now, if you're planning a trip to Italy, Germany, Vietnam, whatever, it's not happening.
Mm-hmm.
If you're planning on vacations, probably even anywhere, it's not happening. So what people are doing is they're taking that money and putting it back in their homes. And it's affected us in some ways it hasn't. See, the typical appliance store will run with somewhere between 70 and 120 brands. And that's fine. And that's certainly good marketing, because I have to go and fix them. It's untenable. So what we've tried to do is try to be very important to a smaller amount of brands. So we'll have more in stock. So let's just take this moment in time where, inventory is hard to come by and everything. We typically have fewer SKUs stocked deeper, so we're not as effective. We also, through luck, or probably luck, or because we're perpetual optimists, didn't cancel purchase orders in February, March, and April like most did. So we weren't affected until now. But really what it comes down to is when you come to Yale, you're expecting, say, for dishwashers, 30 choices. You might have 6 to 8 choices now, but there's 6 to 8 good choices. Right now, that's acceptable, more than acceptable, to have something that somewhat people like. Like if you come in looking for a Bosch, say, now not to pick on Bosch, or KitchenAid, and you want a Bosch, end up with KitchenAid, it's not a terrible thing. In the consumer's mind, it's not terrible. If, say, vice versa, KitchenAid to Bosch, or Bosch to Miele, or if you have things that people want and maybe in other brands, I always tell customers to be, feature loyal, not brand loyal. Because if you're brand loyal, say, I want this kitchen, you're going to be disappointed. If you're feature loyal, you'll have more choices, obviously. So
guys, I'm sorry, go ahead.
We've been affected, just not as much as somebody that's trying to order 70 from 70 different to 120 different brands. It's not tenable right now.
I'm always trying to take something away from any, I ask a question and then you answer and I'm like, okay, is there a way that I can take sort of a nugget from what you just said? I'm like, because I'm always aware that both for myself as a person who is in business and trying to lead a business, but is a small one, that you have a certain amount of scale that we haven't achieved yet, right? And I'm going, there's somebody listening to this that's running their appliance store. And I mentioned to this when I was, before we started recording, that my parents own an appliance store. So I grew up in, little tiny 3,000 person town. We own this appliance store, 5,000 square feet. And I'm going, we had Frigidaire and GE and Maytag. Like that was it, and we thought 3 options was a great day. And so on some level, I'm listening to the advice and I'm going, how can I make this actionable for somebody who hasn't reached your scale yet? Because you're speaking from a position, frankly, of just leadership at this point. I'm listening to you and I'm thinking something you just said that I can really take away towards getting to where you are is, again, have the best choices. And I'm almost recognizing a little bit of a through line, it seems like, in that everything you're saying is tying back to how do you serve your customer the best?
Yeah, and you can't be everything to everybody. You can't chase other people, right? You got to, who's your core customer and how best to appeal them? And we're lucky. We try to go from medium to super premium. But we're not for everybody, and that's okay. Especially okay when you're doing advertising. Like if you do, for people listening to Google Ads, if you're super premium, you set your filter to the top 10, 20%, and you really laser focus to the people you're trying to communicate to. And that's what it is. It's like picking where you want to be. Frigidaire, G, and Maytag may be good for a specific set of in a specific area. Personally, if I was your parents' advisor, I'd say let's pick some aspirational stuff. 1 or 2 aspirational brands. Let's pick a couple medium brands and roll with that.
Right. I think that's excellent advice. I'll make sure to tell them, right? I'll call my mom tomorrow. Steve said.
Yeah. Listen, man, this could be one of the big mistakes again. I could. You don't want to be around. You don't want to be around for those. So.
Right. Well, I'll make sure to say Steve said, not I said. It was
dot.
Right. Steve said to do this thing. I'm just passing it along. Don't blame me. When you is growth, would you say a growth is a constant goal for the company, or would you say it changes depending on other factors? So what goals would you say remain constant and what don't? And I'm asking that for 2 reasons. One, as a leader, how are you planning those things? But also 2, operationally and tactically on the marketing side, I'm going, how are you managing how your goals change and what that means? What are your employees doing to adjust to that? So what goals stay true? Is growth always a goal?
I define growth differently than most people do. I think growth is, there's a couple of measurements that I always look at. One is NPS, or Net Promoter Score. Because here's what happens, right? Here's what appliance stores do. And listen, anybody that's survived as an appliance store over the last 10 years, you have my respect. But here's where we get wrong. It's like we don't budget or we don't expense, and there's no mechanism. So what happens is we grow without the foundation of growth. So what happens is, or we add like 20 cookie cutter stores that have absolutely no imagination. So what really happens is, as you grow, you get your top line revenue, but there's no bottom line revenue, and you're not satisfying your customers anymore. It's almost like a gravitational pull to mediocrity. The way people grow is, I am not prepared to grow, and we didn't grow until 2015, almost 90 years after we established the store, because I never felt we were ready to. You need to have those mechanisms in place of customer satisfaction, which means to me sales, which means to me install, delivery, and service. If you are missing one of those components, in my opinion, you cannot grow. You cannot, and again, for the customer standpoint listening to this, I want them satisfied. At the same time, if you're going to grow means bottom line growth. And if it's a lot more work for the same, it's not good for the customer, it's not good for the company either. Because what happens is, if the same people are doing more things, it's only a matter of time before one of those big cogs burns out and then the whole machine just goes. So you almost have to plan the architecture growth through customer satisfaction, and then you grow.
Okay. What would you say tactically when you say plan the architect through customer satisfaction? Are you specifically looking at, and maybe I'm getting too tactical, but just trying to narrow down to sort of a little like, do this. Would you say the first place you look is your HR department, and then the second place you look is your budget or?
I think HR is very important. I did HR as one of my first jobs. Everyone talks about, people being, it doesn't matter, right? It's like you go on TV, where we try harder, or, you can do it, we can help. And it's almost like punchlines because they can't help. People are a huge asset and they have to be treated as such, meaning you have to train them. So HR is important. Training is important. Incentivizing is important. In the whole management side of that, with metrics of what is success, right? Because what it comes down to, if you failed because I failed you, then I failed, right? And a lot of people is like, when I was started in sales, my dad handed me a sales book. That was my training. And I had to figure it out. And it sucked, right? But you can't do that at scale, right? You can't hire 5, 6, 8 people and say, figure it out. Maybe 1 or 2 might.
Right.
You want more than 1 or 2.
Well, and that was a really tangible question. So in prepping for growth, you're very focused on hiring. Your HR department's a critical component of that, and thinking forward a little bit, like we're going to need these people. You work across a lot of, you would have had, maybe this has shifted some, but you would have had floor salespeople, admin, ops, service is a very important component for you. And delivery, obviously, like service, maybe that includes delivery and install. And so I'm going, how do you approach hiring for the different roles? Do you approach hiring differently depending on the role?
Well, it's funny because up until about 5 years ago, the process was people would come in their resumes, and me and the managers would do our best to try to interview. In HR. HR would do a nice job waiting out. Now, what we did is we brought the recruiting into the company. We have someone whose job it is to recruit and vet. And she actually did it for us as an outside, and she was able to do it here part-time. Now she's full-time. So she has the skills, the vetting skills, and everything else. And of course, all this stuff, is imperfect. As much as you try to make it perfect, this isn't an art as much as it's science. But the way you do it is that you have a strong HR recruiting. Of course, there are things that you will never hire for. That you will never tolerate, obviously. But it's as much as art science. So, recruiting, managers will interview. We'll do the background checks and all the rest of it. Then we'll give the offer sheet. Then they go to training. And then once training, training is people, systems, skills training, right? Because they got to know the system, they got to know the skills, and they got to be, trained as people. And then there's got to be checks along the way. Okay, is this person doing the job? Maybe how do they learn? And all the rest of it. So it's a real process. The good news, and this is not really good news for our industry, is that a lot of the traditional places that people would go, like hospitality, hotels have been murdered. So hospitality, I've always had, back when I was hiring, the best luck hiring waiters and people from the restaurant industry because they're fast, they're quick moving, they're used to complaints. And now you've got thousands. We had 6 sales jobs opening, I think over 1,000 resumes.
Wow.
This last time, yeah. So they're out there for all of us listening to the podcast. There's some great people now, and you're not going to get another opportunity like this for a long time. So now's a good time to get to hiring good people.
That's a fascinating, how many people would think of go to the service and hospitality industry to hire your sales role, your customer service roles, because they are the most on your feet thinking, they're constantly dealing with the worst crap, right? Like, customers are incredibly demanding. It's almost never that person's fault. It's almost always someone in the back room's fault that they're dealing with in as a midpoint. Like, they have to solve things on the fly. Usually they're dealing with multiple customers at once. You and I both know how demanding customers can be in the service, not just in the home service industry, but in like the bar or, and so that's fascinating. I would never have thought of that. That's amazing. Okay. I have some people that I need to go tell.
Yeah, it's a good piece of advice, especially now.
You guys have really, like, obviously through our communication, you guys have adjusted your policies on being in store. You've shifted a lot of things digitally. You've shifted a lot of communication digitally. One of the things you mentioned was live chat. And I'm wondering, I've asked a lot of people, do you text customers? And I mentioned Alex Hallmark, and he is all for, absolutely, you should be texting customers. And he also is a huge component of live chat. And I'm wondering, would you say that that is something that you'll play down in 6 months or 7 months if people get to start coming back into the store, that you'll be pushing again for that, or that you'll say, I think this is fantastic. This is a great thing that serves the customer. I want to really keep going on this whole live chat and maybe texting. I don't know if you do texting.
If it serves the customer, we'll keep it. We do text, but there's a fine line between informing and annoying. Like if I'm going to tell you about the sale I had, we're going to have, or whatever it is that we do, whatever promotional event, I'm not going to do it through text because I think that's. But if you want me to tell you that your delivery is happening in 30 minutes, I'll text you because that's important enough information. You requested it, I'll text you. Some of the, we don't do bots. Except at night when there's nobody here. We prefer live chat. But bots are good for mundane stuff. Ours' name is Jenny. Jenny is going to tell you that the delivery guys will be there in 30 minutes.
Yes.
So we want to give people the power to customize the experience. And do that, we give them a login to go to the website, put in their invoice number, and track the truck to their house. Stuff like that. We don't want them there. Originally when I started, it was all day, and then it was 4 hours, then it was 2 hours. Now we don't even want them there for 20 minutes. We want them there in the same minute that we arrive.
Right.
Yeah. It's because people's time are worth something. So I really think that, I think live chat is awesome. Certainly better than a bot, but it's got to be, someone's on the website and people have an attention span of like 7 seconds, you got to be there. As far as automating some of the other stuff, I think texting can be a benefit to a customer, provided they opt in on it and want some of your updates.
So texting for marketing, don't do it. Texting for service and keeping the customer informed about what's important to them, do it.
Yeah. Again, I'm not selling shirts here either.
Yeah.
If I'm like Ralph Lauren and you sign up for a texting arrangement and I would text you that we're going to have a spring sale coming up, save 40% today only. Yeah, that has value to it because you opted in on it. But really, I've never developed opt-in on texting. I opt in on email. So what we try to do is send an email because it's never that important. We don't have that much seasonality.
Let me ask, if you don't mind, as we're wrapping up a little bit, I need just for my own, what I pay attention to a lot, I need to ask you some tactical marketing things, if you don't mind. And so one question is, how much have you seen the investment into your website grow as basically a critical operations component of your business?
The website is something that we battle every day at what to do, whether it's, I love our web provider, Renuity in Canada. I think they're great guys. There was talk of us doing our own thing, doing their thing. There's no question that the path of purchase is online. No question about it. So much so that we don't spend really any money on it. You'll never see us in a magazine, in a newspaper, on a radio talk show, none of that stuff. We don't do any of it. But we do spend money on the website because that is the path of purchase. And that is an ongoing investment, probably $250,000 a year. Just on something like that. Because it's more than just a website. It's got, certainly the blog on it, all the social media, the learning centers, all the feeds that go into it. So there is a lot to it. That's one of our bigger expenses, and will be our bigger expense going forward.
Yeah, you feel strongly that
people are starting to buy appliances online.
Yeah.
So
this is an expense. This is an expense that serves a customer.
Exactly.
Okay. You you mentioned you have a website provider that's actually an outsourced person. Do you primarily outsource, let's call it your digital marketing, although I'm not sure if that's a fair statement. I think there's a difference between having a website and doing digital marketing actively, right? So let's just say your website, that's all outsourced, or is it you have someone in-house handling that?
Kind of a mixture of both. I mean, we call the shots. It's got our look and feel to it. Mm-hmm. They're the developers behind it. As far as social media, blogging, video, and YouTube has become popular, that's all in-source. I don't think when it comes to the critical components of business, you don't outsource it. If you do outsource it, you have to have strict control and guidelines over it. So those are the only two ways to go. If you're going to completely outsource your marketing or whatever it is you do and not have a handle on it, I think it's a recipe for disaster, and you never learn anything. So
I'm totally with you. I am an outsourced provider, and I'm going every single time we talk to it, like we're always trying to be as transparent, as accountable as possible. We're trying to, and so to hear you say that those things are critical, I'm like, okay, cool. Yeah, we're doing the right thing.
That's what you want as an outsourced provider, right? You want to be able to work with people to be able to tell the story that you need to be told. You can't just, hi, I'm Nathan Young. I'm going to help you with your marketing, and they throw the book at you, and you're like, what do you want me to do? What's important? What's the story you want me to tell? Because I'm not going to know what your story is better than you would. So you're going to need at least 1 or 2 point people, or it'll never work for you.
Right.
Right.
Oh, I'm totally with you. How do you have mentioned that you have the website and that you you have a pretty decent focus on content. Do you focus on any other kinds of marketing, digital or otherwise?
We do spend some money on AdWords, not a lot. Okay. But typically what we try to do, everything we do is how to, we write certainly our blog. We do a lot of video. We do some the one thing you do is, I know a little bit of Google Analytics. When you look at Google Analytics, the Facebook stuff, and we don't put any money into it, LinkedIn and all that, it doesn't really drive traffic. It doesn't drive business. And again, one of the takeaways is I used to be in Pinterest. I haven't done it in like 6 or 7 years. There are certain businesses that I think would do well on Pinterest. But I think if you're talking a small business, you can't be Pinterest, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, blog, video. Pick the channels that you think you can be good at and that serves the customers, and that's what you do. And you don't need 7, maybe 2 or 3, right?
Well, and on some level, you're saying if you divide your own attention up to each one of those things, you're not going to be able to put out content that's useful across of that. Like focus on one where you can do something useful.
Exactly. No question.
Okay. Expense that serves your customer is going to be like the right expenses that serve the customer is the tagline of this episode. Like
everything that serves the customers, it's there's no win-lose mentality anymore. I can't drive out of here in a Rolls Royce as everybody else is taking the tea home. I mean, it's got to be fair. You got to be fair to the people you work with. You got to be fair to your customers, and as long as everybody gets something, I don't see anybody, a small business, losing, even to a large business like a Home Depot.
I don't think that I could ask for any more excellent advice than what you've provided so far. Having listened to you this entire time, I'm like, all right, well, I could spend a couple of weeks getting to know this guy and learning from him. But for the sake of respect of his time, I should cut it off.
Listen, it's like my dad used to say, experience, youth can't buy experience, and experience can't buy youth. So I'll take your age. You can have my experience. You want to do that?
Wait, I can't have both? Dang it.
I wish it did.
Right. Yeah. If only. If only. Well, Steve, having you on, having this conversation has been incredibly. I'm gonna go there. I'm gonna say enlightening. And if somebody else wants to take in, you mentioned a blog and some other content that's all very much like DIY or something really helpful. Obviously, where can people find that?
You know, most of the appliance stores in the United States subscribe to our blog. It's right off our website. We don't really promote ourselves. We teach people how to buy appliances. And if you got salespeople that don't know how to know, they probably by downloading guides will learn how to sell appliances, which I suspect is a core part of our audience. Again, I've never been much for self-promotion. So it's pretty honest stuff. And that's really what we do. We've gone on YouTube recently. We have some videos, and that's really about it. You're not going to find, we don't have a PR department. I just don't believe in that sort of thing. But those are the two places.
Awesome. And if you don't mind, can you give me the actual domain of the website and the channel of the YouTube so anybody can look it up?
Well, it's blog.yaleappliance.com, and the YouTube channel is just Yale Appliance, I think.
Excellent.
Funny, I should know that, shouldn't I?
Well, you've been pretty consistent on I don't think that much about promoting ourselves. We want to constantly make content useful for other people. And so the idea that you would sort of forget what the channel name is actually really holds to what you're saying.
The best way to promote yourself is by executing whatever it is you say you're going to do.
Do what you say you will do.
Do what you say you're going to do. And when you don't, apologize for not doing it and fix it in a hurry. Yep. Because nobody's perfect either, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, that's smart.
All right. I don't think I can end on something better. Once again, this has been Steve Sheinkopf from Yale Appliance. And Steve, it's been such a pleasure getting to talk to you today.
Really nice talking to you.
Excellent. This is Nathan Young for Home Service Leaders Podcast and More Leads Online signing off. Thanks so much, everybody.